what you say to students is the senior year, and I tell them it's when you come in here, the first year, we're really going to do everything we can to get you knowing the fingerboard and get the technique down. The sophomore year, we're going to really put you in as much as possible situations where you're playing in front of other people. You could play for a hospice. You can play for a nursing home. Places where people are basically ignored, and it's a wonderful resource.
I had such a great time connecting with today's guest for the podcast. Hi, I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are chatting today with Jacqueline Pickett. Now, Jackie teaches double bass at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, and she's also principal bass with the Columbus Symphony there in Georgia, and does so many other things, which we dig into on this podcast. Just a wonderful person. She's been active in the double bass world for years and years, has done so much in the world of jazz, chamber music, Baroque, starting nonprofits. She ran a nonprofit called the Torch Academy for years and years, and she is getting a double bass program in the schools going in Columbus, Georgia. So we talk about that and so much more. I know you're going to love today's episode. We've got some great sponsors for today's show. I'd like to thank Upton Bass, and I'd like to thank D'Addario Strings and A440 Violin Shop. More on all of them later. But let's dig into this conversation with Dr. Jacqueline Pickett. So Laura, so you've been somebody that's been recommended multiple times, but like Lauren Pierce is a friend of mine, and she said, have you thought of talking to Jackie for the podcast? Because first of all, you've done a lot in the bass world, and you were somebody that really gave her a break. She said you're someone who, in her words, took a chance on her and brought her in for some master classes. So maybe we could even just start there. I know it's a weird spot to start, but
No, it isn't.
Okay.
No, it isn't. It's actually quite logical. I've always believed that we as double bass players, and you're a great example of this, Jason, we should support each other when we see something that is really exceptional. And I was just looking through some YouTube videos, and here was this person playing this fabulous music with a guitarist, and just, it sounded so wonderful. It touched your soul, besides being technically correct and everything. And then come to find out, she's from Marietta, Georgia, and she played in the Youth Symphony. I probably crossed paths with this person, and it's like, wow. I happen to do adjunct teaching, or whatever they call it these days, at Agnes Scott, which is a women's college here in Atlanta. And I wanted to have a bass day, something that I've since taken to Columbus State. And she was just the logical choice. And I had to pay her out of my own pocket because, of course, people aren't, oh, yeah, we're going to bring this person down that we've never heard of and do. And it's like, oh, you crazy? This person is amazing. And so I just took it upon myself to pay her for coming down and covered her expenses. And she led a wonderful masterclass and spoke with the players and inspired. I have to actually thank her for helping me get my studio started in Columbus, and the studio rolling at, oh, you want to come up now? Yeah, all right. My black cat, every witch has one.
What a
okay. Yeah, 17, and anyhow, she is just a wonderful musician, so I don't feel that it's anything unusual or out of line with my philosophy of the bassist as being a member of a community. I grew up with that. So I'm glad that she's started, or she's part of the Discover Double Bass channel. Mm-hmm. And I recommend all the bassists that I meet throughout Georgia to subscribe to that. I say, of course, check out the free lessons, but come on, subscribe and take advantage of this wonderful opportunity to learn about your instrument and then study with a private teacher. So she is helping me get a lot more young people interested in pursuing the double bass, the acoustic double bass. Electric double bass, kids are all over that, but the acoustic double bass is something that is very exciting too, and they just need to know about it. Yeah. So thank you, Lauren. And we can also segue into community. I'm a small town person. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. It's actually where the mountains are in Pennsylvania, in southwestern Pennsylvania, in Somerset County. And we had a very small high school. I think my graduating class was like 257 people, and that was the huge school in the area. And the superintendent of the school, one of the town doctors, the newspaper person, the blacksmith. Yes, I grew up in Amish country where people live without electricity, and there was a blacksmith, quite busy, played the clarinet, and the bass player, I forget what he did, but they were all sort of politicians and community leaders. And we'd have a Lions Club show at least twice a year, and everybody would gather to see arts. The arts were just so important in our small town. And they had a little old time, hot music ensemble, New Orleans jazz, Dixieland, whatever you want to call it. And it was just so cool. The whole town, like, oh, this is great. And people still remember that band to this day. Every event, there wasn't much money, but our school had a band, an orchestra, and a chorus. And it was quite good. As a matter of fact, one of the flute players in my school orchestra is the piccolo player for the Boston Symphony. I mean, we're talking serious good. And the cello player, one of the cello players, who was also the band concertmaster, became one of the first African American deans at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. And I mean, it was just there was tremendous value placed on education and the importance of a well-rounded education in creating a cohesive, close community. So it was like growing up in a family, and I always had that support. No matter what I did. You want to play the double bass? It wasn't like, oh, this is an awful thing, you should go into engineering. Now, of course, they did say you might want to study music education, but that was just, some pragmatic advice at the time. And so I was always encouraged, I was always loved, and I think that's one of the things that helps set a foundation for success. That knowing that you have a community, and we do that in the bass world. Believe it or not, we have a community here. No matter, we are not cutthroat. Woodwind players are cutthroat. We are not cutthroat, and that is so cool. And young people catch on to that when they learn about the acoustic bass and they see things like the International Society of Bassists, and they just see how the groups do at the school. Like my studio at Columbus, we're called the Schwabassi because I'm a foodie. Yeah, what can I say? So and they catch on to things like that, and then each of the students go back to their hometowns. And the wonderful thing about the acoustic bass is it fits into the band programs. And I understand people are cutting and they need that money for other things, but they still try to hang on to band and chorus. So and again, I I had a nonprofit. I just ended it this year, so I was able to put some basses in the school program so they can start. And yeah, I find it to be an investment that pays back dividends.
Why do the concept of just how cohesive we have a community, in the bass world, it really is a cohesive community, different than woodwinds. We're not cutthroat, like other instruments. Do you have any thoughts on why that is? I like to sort of spitball. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because there's so much work. It's the law of supply and demand. There's just so much. Think of the last day that you went without, no, not you, but a normal person who isn't, not normal, a person who doesn't play the double bass.
Yeah.
Think of the last time they went a day without actually hearing a bass. Think of the last time they went without actually hearing music. But particularly a bass. You can go a whole day without hearing drums, but they use us to sell stuff. Madison Avenue loves us. You're not going to go, especially an acoustic bass, all the stuff that we've been selling, toothpaste, boonga-doong-ding-ding-ding-ding, it's a hook. In pop music, they call it a hook. Some line, it's a mantra that comes back over and over again. Like I used to live in Chicago, and I drive down Clark every morning to the Buddhist temple and say my chants, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and it comes back over and over again. So in pop music, they call it a hook, and bass players do that. And so without even knowing it, it doesn't really work with an electric bass. There's something about the wood in an acoustic bass that really, it touches your heart. Well, it's your heartbeat.
Yeah.
The function of what we do. And that's probably another reason why there's so much potential for work for us as bass players, is because we are that pulse. That's what we do, and and you're drawn to the instrument. I mean, I had a kind of a sad, this is, recruitment season. I had a girl from Honduras who really wanted to come up and join the studio, but, we finally got to the nitty gritty. Her parents wanted her to do something else. Yeah. And, it was like, all the money we could offer you is not going to, you got to get it straight with your parents to come up here. And so she will eventually, I think she'll be a bass player, but she has to learn how to really work with her parents so that they can see how much she loves to do this. And that is, there's always room. I mean, I feel that there's always room for all of us to pursue our passions and make logical choices in the marketplace. Yeah. I think my life is an example of that, because I am in no way super talented on this instrument, but I love it so much that it's all that I have. And it's not like I'm this hermit who spends all their time with black cats and hey boo, hey boo, hey, boo. Okay. Boo boo. And it's something. Oh, this is an interesting picture. You got to see this. Can you see that?
Yeah. Hey, picture? Is that Duke Ellington?
That is Duke Ellington and Ray Brown, and that is from the cover shoot photo of This One's for Blanton. And because Jimmy Blanton's family is from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I try to employ craftsmen and artists as much as possible. So I had some stained glass windows that needed to be replaced, and these craftsmen who did the windows actually got this photo. They gave it to me because they thought I'd appreciate it. The Blanton family didn't. Oh, this tragic thing. I live in the city of Ma Rainey in Columbus, Georgia. Oftentimes these great artists, I won't say oftentimes, sometimes the families really don't know who they were. And since Jimmy Blanton died so young, and for me there was a connection because I actually, one of my teachers was Richard Davis, and he had Jimmy Blanton's bass. And I actually got to play that thing for several years.
Really?
And so
wow.
I know, I was just
How
like,
cool.
yeah, that's what I said. How cool is this? So that, a young Ray Brown and Duke Ellington, I'm sure they were posing for the camera, but still that was the energy of the room. I'm going to sit down and play this. And knowing that Duke Ellington wanted to be a painter and being in this area of the country, people who were artists, they had to be pragmatic. And the painter thing carries over to George Washington Carver, who was a great painter. Ellington took that art and created opportunities to expand the bass into the solo literature with people like Jimmy Blanton. Yeah. And Carver took that ability that he wanted to paint and do the visual art. This is one of my favorite paintings. I'm going to stay on topic. Can you see that? Isn't that
yeah, that's
awesome?
Gorgeous. Wow.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in that picture. But Carver planted seeds and flowers. And my family is originally from Brantley, Alabama. It's that southern part, Florala and all that stuff where Florida and Alabama meet. Mm-hmm. And we had the influence, and in fact, I'm still a gardener, and that gets into community and co-ops and farm to table and your health and all of that. But the whole idea of the power of being an artist and the importance of what we do. Carver turned down a millionaire's salary from Henry Ford just because he was happy where he was in Tuskegee. And he had a lot to do with people, and he understood that people are the real source of wealth. Yeah. People. Yeah. And that's what we do as bassists. That's why I think we have such community in the bass world, even though we're not thinking about it on this deep philosophical level. It comes out. It's the base of our personal pyramids, of our personal power. It is the base. We care. You can't. You pick up a bass, you're not going to be playing a solo line. It's not about you. It's about making the other people in the group sound their best. I think that's when we get our, like playing a pedal tone in an orchestra. All this stuff's going on. A violinist doesn't really get excited about that. But
no, but it's a beautiful thing. It's like you're this foundational and just absorbing what's going on around you, and like you said, trying to make others look good, trying to highlight. It's such a different role than maybe up there in the first violins. No offense to first violins, but like going through the upper position stuff. It's just a totally different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
D'Addario Zayak strings are really interesting. They're synthetic gut strings. And here is D'Addario string specialist Lyris Hung on what makes these strings so special.
Zayak is our only synthetic string for bass at the moment. And that is made with a peak core. It's actually called Zayak. It's a Zayak core. And that for those strings, you'll notice they're slightly thicker in diameter, the Zayak, than, say, the Kaplan or the helicore, and primarily a product of the synthetic core being lower mass. So because it's lower mass, it needs more of it. And so we use, kind of a big bundle of that fiber for the core, and then we wind with higher mass materials on the outside.
Learn more about these and all D'Addario strings at contrabassconversations.com/strings. Whenever anybody's going to the Midwest, and I lived in Chicago, Illinois for years and years, I tell them to go to A440. If they're looking for a bow, if they're looking for a bass, if they need some repairs done, if they have a student who's looking for an instrument, A440 has been serving the community for years and years. They're located just west of Wrigley Field in beautiful Chicago. They do great work, and they've been a big supporter of bass events over the years, whether it's the Chicago Bass Festival or really any bass event. A440, you guys rock. Check them out at a440violinshop.com.
And so it's so there's such opportunity, especially with the changing demographics and economic condition of what art is as an employment opportunity in the United States. It's wide open for the double bass. I mean, we can get along in the business world. We can make the I don't want to say argument. We can make the case that developing a double bass, which is exactly what I did in Columbus, which is why I stopped the nonprofit. I'm developing a citywide double bass program with the blessings of the school superintendent.
Are you really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I'm very excited about that because it just creates more employment opportunities. So I'm graduating students and they actually have something to start however they want to shape their careers, but they have a starting point in going back to their communities and building these bass programs. So if I have my way, instead of a Steinway in everyone's house, there will be a double bass in everyone's house, sitting there collecting dust. It'll be a status symbol of high art, just that we are on top of it as far as the social circle goes. But
well, that's a beautiful thing. Wow.
It's a beautiful thought.
Yeah.
And they take up about the same amount of space. So. Yeah.
So what, like if someone, like that's so cool that you're doing that. And, you know, a friend of mine, Kate Jones in the Dallas area, she's working, she's employed.
She's awesome.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
and what
I know she is.
And I think that there's so much opportunity for what you're starting in Columbus. Like what would you, like, let's say someone's listening to this and lives in a town of 50,000, 100,000, and they want to get something going like that. Like, what did you do to get the wheels in motion in Columbus to get this program started?
Wow. It takes time.
Okay.
You have to be patient, and you need to have a vision of where to start. So you have to take whatever is at hand, whatever you're doing. Let's say most likely the situation would be that you would be a school teacher or a bass player who just recently graduated and you've come back to live in a community that you're familiar with. Start a studio. Go find the local music teacher, or if the music isn't available, there's a lot of homeschooling programs now that they even have organized orchestras, but you don't have to go that big. Just find a few students. And the way you find them is to polish off your Bach cello suites. Isn't it amazing now? It's like high school kids are playing those. And when I was coming up, that was like, I remember Gary Carr saying that I only practice these in my room for myself. You know?
I know.
It's like the potential. That's another reason. The potential for the acoustic bass is just still in its infancy. What we can do with this instrument is just so exciting. But getting back to how do you start this program? You start where you are. So let's just take it. That's the most realistic one. Someone's just got their bachelor's degree, and I kick my students out of their studio after the bachelor's degree. I don't say, well, you're going to grad school. No, you're going out in the world, and then you cash flow grad school. But so you're out in the world, and you're starting a studio. How do you start that studio? You go to the local Lions Club. PTAs are very good for this. People who are always looking for interesting things, and they don't have the resources most of the time. That's a different story with PTAs and city schools, but that's another subject. You go to those organizations and you play. You actually perform, and they'll see your enthusiasm. And you're going to attract somebody who's going to say, I want my child to start this, because parents see it. Oh, it's amazing. Because of computers, people don't learn cursor. They don't learn how to write that.
Right.
And so there is amazing lack of eye hand coordination. We take it for granted, especially as acoustic double bass players, because the right hand needs to stay somewhat compact. You can call it shapes, circles, whatever. And while the left hand is moving great distances up and down the fingerboard. And, parents in the know, they see all this. And it's like, this person is really coordinated. And my child, they think, but they don't really, because that's been taken away by the mad rush to make everyone a computer genius or a mathematical wizard, which is great because you can look at the double bass as teaching music as math. Okay, so you're in there playing, and you have to have a deep perspective of what you can do with your instrument. Mm-hmm. So you need to study. Listen to every one of Jason Heath's podcasts. Go to the library and go touch a book. Go touch the physical paper. Get yourself away from the computer and just go into a Books A Million or a local. I support the local bookstores or the old used books. It doesn't matter what the subject is. Just pick up a book and read it, and you will somehow connect that back when you get used to doing this. I guess it's a way of thinking globally, and you will connect that back to the bass. And then when you go in and make these presentations, it's part of your iceberg. There's a part that we see that's above sea level. And then there's that whole part where the foundation is perception. And it sort of gets into the realm of the unknown, but we know it. It's just that we don't know we know it until it comes out. It's absorbed. It's information that's absorbed. That's why it's important to read a lot of nonfiction. To me, that's why it's important to read, because it adds to our ability to pull out what knowledge is already in us. That got really way too philosophical.
But, I love it. That's I love going deep.
But that is how you can start. That's how you attract the students. Parents will be attracted to that. It's like a win-win for everyone. And then you have a long-term vision, and your short-term vision is building to that long-term. So you find the rate that you don't do anything really for free, and you should teach that from day one. So you find a rate that they can afford. You get a pulse of what the town is, and you charge that rate. And if you need to offer group lessons, you do it that's good. You got more people. And I think that's how it starts. It's little baby steps, but it starts with you, the individual, just being so passionate and so interested in knowing and learning and listening. That's the real source of sustainable wealth, and that's how you build your career. I mean, that's what I did, and I did pretty well. I mean, I'm happy, and I have some nice real estate, and it's not like I just took advantage of what was put in front of me, and I committed. This is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. And I love that concept of just starting where you're at in your community and building from there, and then the next step and the next step and the next step.
Absolutely. And it's amazing what I mean, in my own personal journey, I have found some incredible double bass players who actually went to school and studied the double bass, and they're doing something else with their lives because that's the path their lives took, but they still have this great ability on bass, and they have a lot to share, and they're still interested in playing, which I think comes back to the performing part. The part of my personality is more that I'm a principal bass, but I can be a section bass player, but I'm happy when I'm a principal bass. And something that you can, because any professional orchestra is nowadays, it's really a very fine ensemble. And so in the smaller professional orchestras and smaller communities, you have these bass players that can really play well. It's just that they're basically freaked out because I do a 9-to-5 job and then I come here and I play. You just make them feel relaxed and you just say the truth. Wow, that was really awesome. And they start listening, because the first thing to relaxing, not listening, when they start listening, they start bringing in more. They don't feel intimidated, so they don't feel like they have to prove anything. Let's just be a straight shooter here. So then they can open up to really creating a section sound and centering pitch and playing in tune, because they're relaxed. That's why we say relax, or at some conservatories, teachers yell, relax. It's basically to get yourself in a position where the music can resonate. And of course, we all know the music is in you and it comes through your instrument. A great example is if you put a very high surgical grade scalpel in my hand, who knows nothing about surgery, and you put a run-of-the-mill scalpel that wouldn't kill you in the hand of an experienced surgeon, you would take the experienced surgeon over me. That proves that argument. Done. The music is in you. Okay, so that is one of the ways, and the bases are the foundation. And those people are computer programmers. They are high school English teachers. There is another source of networking right there. Again, relations, people don't remember anything you say. They remember how you make them feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's just the bottom line.
I love that you tell your people after they graduate with a bachelor's, get out in the real world, or get out in the world and do something, and then cash fund the next degrees.
Cash flow, that's the word, cash flow.
Yeah. That's a beautiful and how frequently that doesn't happen. People they stay in school just because that's the most obvious option. Oh, I got a bachelor's, I'll get a master's, I'll go on and on. What sort of, I'm sure it's some of the things we've been talking about, but what do you tell these seniors in college when they're headed out, and they, what are some of the lessons you set them off with?
I got one that's so ticked off at me because I wouldn't write him a letter of recommendation to study with this really great jazz musician in New York. It's like, no, I'm not writing you a letter because you need to be on your own. He's there, but I can learn a lot from this guy. We'll take private lessons. I mean, just shut him up. It's like you need to make income. You need to really take, it makes them take their undergrad more seriously. I mean, there's a time to party, and then there's a time to sit down and work. Mm-hmm. And if you go in with I'm going to answer your question. If you go in with the predetermined thought that, I have at least through a master's to get this done, you're going to waste time. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think I would say to them what my mother said to me, which was, Jackie, and this was back in the mid-19th century, I only have $1,500 for you to go. No, she didn't say that. I have $1,500. That was, I mean, even in the 70s, where the heck could you go to school for $1,500? Oh, I was so serious. I mean, I was in that lab listening to those major sevenths and minor seconds, and it's like, it's like, oh yeah. What you say to students is the senior year, and I tell them it's when you come in here, the first year, we're really going to do everything we can to get you knowing the fingerboard and get the technique down. The sophomore year, we're going to really put you in, as much as possible, situations where you're playing in front of other people. You could play for a hospice. You can play for a nursing home. places where people are basically ignored, and it's a wonderful resource. So we're getting you fulfilling. I know you're looking for technique. This is technique. It's the technique of dealing with other people, and because you got to deal with other people as long as you're on this planet. And so they get to have intergenerational relations that. Oh, they just so fulfilling. It's just wonderful. Then the junior year, it depends on the track that you take. You have to do some kind of recital in front of frustrated violin professors who think they need to. I shouldn't have said that. You have to play with people who really are just looking for technique and their values are kind of out of touch with the pragmatic sense of going out and getting a job or creating yourself a job, being an entrepreneur. Anyhow, you have to play a recital that's flawless on the double bass, when usually most double bass players don't start. Some do now with the early bass programs until they're in their teens. And you're competing with violinists who started playing, they had Mozart put against a mom's womb. It's just, it's unrealistic. So you have to do that depending on the track you pick. And then your senior year, you are taking auditions to sub in some of the local professional orchestras. And hopefully you'll get a call to do a children's concert or something like that. But you are actively putting yourself as much as possible into playing situations. And the senior year is, I ask them for their plan. What is your 5-year plan after you get out of here? And as soon as they go, I was thinking about going back and living with my parents to save money. I said, that's not an option. Your parents love you very much, and they probably won't say no, so I'm doing this for them. You're not going back. That's it. It's not an option beautiful. To go home.
Yeah.
So what's an example? It all boils down. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. What's an example of a good 5-year plan you've seen? Because I love that you do a 5-year plan with your. Everybody should do that. I need to start doing that with my students. Like what are some where you see and you're like, that's a solid plan.
Okay, I see myself being the bass player for the shows that come through town. That's about as solid as it's going to get. I see myself playing in a pit orchestra, being the bass player for the shows that come in town, being the first call wherever I live. And I see myself having this is where they answer for themselves that they're probably going to have multiple streams of income. I see myself having a studio of 25 to 30 bassists. Now, I've only had one student who has actually written down this plan to this extent, because I've only been at Columbus since 2014, but I've had the ideas in my mind for this for a long time. And one of the first things I did was contacted, I'm not going to sit or name all these names, but I contacted a very famous teacher who has this, and his students don't listen to him either. And he's probably like the most famous, places students in orchestras all the time. And he'll know who he is if he listens to this. So, page 6 for those in the know. And so it really is that vision of being specific as possible. And that is the best plan I've seen so far. And this was the kid that had the option, I want to live with my parents. I said, we're scratching that one out. And then he just said, oh, I never thought of it that way. Just like you were saying before, that we automatically think we're going to go to a master's and a doctorate. And in some cases that is necessary if you still need to gain technique. In some cases, but very rarely. I find that if you really are concentrating, you can go from 0 to 60 and you can do it in 4 years. but you have to remain diligent about it. And then you have to get out in the world and work on your own. So a good 5-year plan says that I have a specific mission at the end of 5 years. And I have a specific mission at the end of 1 year. And I have a specific mission at the end of 6 months. I have a specific mission at the end of the week. I have a specific mission at the end of the day. And, some people don't like to write things down like me. And it really does help to write it down. In fact, I write down my balanced self. What is truly my balanced self? And it's a little note card that I keep in my wallet. I refer to it when I feel a little unbalanced. And number one, what keeps me balanced is my core is that I'm the principal bass of this small orchestra. That's my core. Number two is I want to become a millionaire. Now, that's really weird, but it's knowing that I am constantly thinking about business. I'm constantly thinking about investing. And it's not just the financial aspect of wealth. There is the community aspect of wealth. There's the knowledge aspect of wealth. There is the health aspect of wealth. And what we're doing right now, there's the time aspect of wealth. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have a specific amount of time we're spending with each other. So that's what that means. Number three, which is 5, these geometrical things, is to embrace true love. That to me is very important, to be a very accepting and very loving person. That's why when kids are sophomores, I really get them to do intergenerational experiences. So there's so much love out there that we don't, because it's not on the Madison Avenue is a really intense thing, and it controls our minds to think that there's only certain kinds of love. One of the most fulfilling types of love is just being embraced by other people openly and innocently. So that's number 3. What was number 4 and 5? They're important, but I can't remember them right now. But there were 5. And if I get out my note, I could run and read it to you. But that's not really what's important. And then there's a hillbilly version of that goes ground grub, gas guns, gold. And then there's a more philosophical version of that that's an acronym, which you get from being in academia, which is a bunch of acronyms for everything. And it's New Start AB. And this actually comes from a former surgeon. Her name is Dr. Lorraine Day, and she cured herself of cancer. I'm always maintain physical health. That's one of the other ones. I'm always seeking out people who heal themselves, because that's what I call having skin in the game. You changed your own life by taking the responsibility to do what was necessary. So this surgeon, I think she's from the San Francisco area, so someone should know her, Dr. Lorraine Day. And she has New Start. It's nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, and trust. And the final 2 are AB, an attitude of gratitude, and B for benevolence. And if you put all those together, you have the foundation for good health.
That's beautiful. That resonates so much with me. Those are the sort of things I think as I've gotten older, I've started to realize, like, if I feel unbalanced, if I don't feel like I'm in touch with it, like I'll look, and sometimes it's something as simple as like, oh, did I eat breakfast? Am I drinking enough water? Am I spending time with my wife? Am I, and if I look frequently what I'm feeling anxious or weird about, a lot of the time it's just it's one of those core aspects of life that I feel that's just out of whack. I'm not attending to. And that's beautiful that going back to that 5-year plan. I did one of those. I've done that several times in my life, but I did one back around 2000, and I found it recently, and it was fascinating to go back and see what actually came to pass. And the truth is, I really achieved none of the things on the list, but I made progress towards, and I think just having myself aligned in that direction was just incredibly valuable.
Yeah, that's the point. There's an old saying, you can jump towards the stars. You might not reach the stars, but you've gone higher than you would if you wouldn't have jumped at all.
I like
That's
that.
it.
Yeah. One thing that has impressed me about Upton Bass ever since I got to know them was how many artists there are out there that are so satisfied with the work that Upton has done for them. Here's Mark Ramirez on his experiences having Upton copy his beautiful Cavani bass.
I do a lot of moving around and giving master classes and stuff like this. I had a copy made of it by the Uptons, by Gary and Eric Roy at the Upton shop. They made a copy of it, but they made an even smaller copy. I think it's a 7/8 copy of the bass. I use it now. I use that bass for my solo playing, which I do a lot. Recently, I've been doing a lot, especially here. And it has a detachable neck. The detachable neck, man, I tell you, in Europe, it's the craze.
Learn more at uptonbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast, guys. You know, I'd love to circle back to something you mentioned. You were talking about a well-rounded education, just in general. And that's something, you know, especially out here in Silicon Valley and that sort of thing, it's popular to rip on going to college at all. But, you know, I went to university. I had what I think of as a pretty well-rounded education. And I really do think it has paid off in the decades since. Can you just talk a little bit about the concept of a well-rounded education, like either how yours has impacted your trajectory or what you talk to students about or anything around that concept? I think would be interesting.
It's like vibrato. It's very personal.
Nice. I like that.
So you can get a whole picture of it. It's a very personal thing. So well-roundedness is, I think, learning globally, learning from everything that's out there, everything that you come into contact with, everything you think about. What can I learn from this? What can I take? What is the lesson here? What am I supposed to take from this experience? Yeah, that'll keep you from committing suicide. So, you think I'm kidding. It really, that a well-rounded education really is first expanding your awareness. And when you expand your awareness, then you're able to circle around, like circle the wagons, and then come back to what specific things you need to do. Now let's break that down. Well-rounded education, let's make it more in layman's terms. We have in this country the wonderful opportunity, no matter how much we rag it, every child has a chance to go to school. One of my first jobs was in Mexico City, and I saw what happened when children don't have the opportunity to go to school. Not all children have that opportunity. And then another time, I was in South Africa right after apartheid in 1998. And I got to work with this primary school in Johannesburg. And I had one little girl, I'll never forget, her name was Rabone. And I worked with her with the bass for a week. And it still brings tears to my eyes thinking about it. At the end of the week, she gave me this really tight hug, and there were tears in her eyes. Only playing the bass for 1 week. And they were already in a school, but the whole idea of going to school and getting that experience, they appreciated it so much. You know, that just sticks with me. I spent the whole week going into schools and talking about the bass, and that was an experience. But there's so much in this country that we have, and public education is one of them. No matter how much you cut it down, you still have the opportunity to get that formal kind of learning. You have books, so it's not only what the teacher tells you. You can read, and you can learn how to do real critical thinking, read between the lines, mix that, here it comes, Jason, mix that with what you hear from your own family experience, which is one is written history, which is always written by the person who wins the battle, and the other is your ancestral, your personal history, your DNA history, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your grandfather, your great-grandmother, your father, your mother, your aunts and uncles. That's a whole other oral aspect of history that's passed down through art, through fine art, through music, through theater. We call it in music the griot. So that's a form of education where you can't footnote it. Oh, I love that. Prove it to me. Where does it say it in the New York Times? No, this is what my family did. This is a part of a well-rounded education, combining what is written from the perspective of the person or society or entity playing offense, defense. In the game of chess, you have offense, defense versus defense, offense. They are the aggressor. Nothing good or bad about this. They are the aggressor. They write the history. You attend the public school, but you can still learn. And then you have your family history, which is defense, offense. Doesn't matter. I mean, that's what it is. It's the mass against the personal. It's the societal versus the personal in this power struggle for freedom, for knowledge. Oh boy, we could get into jazz on that one. But it is a well-rounded education is combining the aspects of what you see in nature, of learning about construction by how well a bird builds a nest. If you ever pulled down a nest, since I'm getting this house ready to sell, I'm pulling down quite a few. Pulling down quite a few nests there, Jason. And they are built well. They are built to last. Those are some well-built structures. So you can learn a lot from everything around you. I'm sitting here looking at some trees. I'll turn this around at the peril of someone seeing my messy house. But you can look at the trees, which I'm doing now. I'm not ignoring you. I'm looking outside. And they stay in one place. And they know that place so well that their roots go to where the water is. They know how to stay up during a storm. They just know how to exist over long periods of time, over the sequoias, thousands of years. Here we have the giant poplars in North Carolina, hundreds of years, Yeah. What lessons you can learn from them. Anyhow, that is the truth, though. My truth. That is my truth, and I'm sharing. And that is how I combine educational worlds. I combine what is nature or what is spiritual with what is popular culture or what society deems it is, and you put them together. And that, to me, is what well-rounded means. And the other part, that's personal, how you go about doing it. You can be an apprentice, strike out on your own with your imagination and see where it leads you. There's not a good or bad there. It's just what resonates. It always gets back to that resonance.
Love that.
Maybe it's frequency. Yeah. Resonant. What resonates with you?
And I love the comparison of vibrato to the well. It's a little different for everybody.
Actually, yeah. I mean, that sort of gives you an overall what it can be. It gives you a picture is 1,000 words, so that's a verbal picture.
Well, I need to have you on for a round 2 of the podcast because I've been taking notes as we've been talking. I've got like 35 more topics to talk about. So we can never even begin to dig in, but it would be, maybe we could dig into just one more thing before we wrap up here. I never have anything scripted for these, but I do have one question I usually ask, something along the lines of, if we could go back to right when you were headed off to college. Did you start college at 17, 18? Was that about the age for you?
Yeah, I started at 18.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So like 18-year-old Jacqueline, 18-year-old Jackie, and just give her some advice looking back. What might you tell your 18-year-old self? What advice might you give?
Jackie, this is what my mother said to me. So I never really had much chance. Okay, if I'm going to go back, no, Jackie, just do your best, and always be. When you do your best, you're always going to feel like it's okay. That's it. Sorry, it wasn't much more detailed than that.
That it doesn't need to be any more detailed than that. That's a good piece of advice.
That was interesting, though. That you made me think of something. I was doing a gig last Sunday with one of my. I used to teach at Auburn University many moons ago, and one of my students there was on a gig with me playing electric bass. I was on this other side playing acoustic bass, and at intermission, he came out and he was talking to me, and he said, you told me something, and this gets really scary when you told me something that I share with my students now. And I just looked because I knew it was coming. I couldn't stop him from saying it. And don't say it. We're in front of other people. But he said, I was having trouble counting something, and you told me to go take a walk. Are you expecting something else, Jason? This is me. No, this is it. I said, go take a walk. And he said, that is some of I still tell my students that now. When they have trouble counting, just put the instrument down and go take a walk. Now, not that I was doing any deep thinking at that time, but I noticed that he was having counting, and I needed to get something in him kinesthetically. Oh, that's interesting. Low battery. And so taking a walk, what do you do when you walk? And that's another interesting, how people walk, how they connect to their core or their solar plexus. When you're walking, you have a rhythm, you have a flow, and it's usually symmetrical unless you're practicing to be an actor in one of those World War II films. It's usually symmetrical, left, right, left, whatever you want to say. And it's so accurate that, people measure by walking, because and so this sense of flow, it helped him. Oh, he sounded great, by the way. He says he shares that with his students all the time. So it's just that idea of walking to get a flow, making that and I think that kind of ties in what we were talking about, education, really drawing out what is all. I think a great teacher draws out info from you instead of putting information in you. It's pulling information out of you, and it inspires you to. That's
a great point. I was talking with Barry Green about that. We were teaching at a bass festival recently, and I was watching Barry do a master class, and he got done and he said, I never teach anybody anything. I just point things out. That's all you can do as a teaching role. And I thought, like, what a simple but totally accurate and kind of deep concept, because that is, and that, that changed the way I've approached lessons.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I knew Barry Green when we called him Mean Barry Green. and one of the things that he did, he was always such a generous man. They had this thing called the Congress of Strings. Yeah. And he graciously, he and Paul Ellison taught the bass players, and he had a bass school at the University of Cincinnati, and so we got to play in a master class to bass players, and he said, and we all of course played first movements of Baroque sonatas because we didn't want to make any mistakes, and that's what he said to us, just what you were saying. He said, Well, you know, you haven't played anything, if anything, difficult in it. I don't have anything to say to you. That was like, oh, wow. and everybody had a way of growing from that, even though it seemed like it was mean. It really wasn't. It was like, are you challenging yourself?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
that's a great talk. That's kind of a deep lesson right there. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, Jackie. This is, and like I said, let's definitely do this again. I'll good luck on the move. Jackie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Can't wait to chat with you again. We definitely need to do a round 2 and a round 3. And that's one of the things I love about doing a podcast like this is chatting with somebody I never have before. We've never met in person, Jackie and I, though I feel like I've known her for years through the internet and the bass community and that sort of thing. But digging into the topics we did today, and then that's just the foundation for further conversations like I've done with many people, David Allen Moore, Colin Corner, the list goes on and on. So I really appreciate you tuning in. And if you're not subscribed to the podcast, or you don't even know what that means or how to do it, it's free, by the way. You can go to our website, contrabassconversations.com, and you can click the subscribe button, or contrabassconversations.com/subscribe. It'll have info on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and Amazon Alexa. I think we've got that now too. We've got our own app that you can get for iOS, Android, and Kindle. So you can follow along with the show in a ton of different ways. And while you're there on the website, go ahead and subscribe to our email newsletter. We send out to thousands of people at this point a weekly newsletter about what's going on in the bass world, and we link back to the podcasts. So if email's your jam, which it probably is, because it's still a super important way to communicate, follow along with us there as well. You'll see an option to subscribe. Contrabass Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, and Mitch Mooring. And if you're looking for a double bass, Mitch is making beautiful instruments in the Dallas area. Look him up online at mitchmooring.com. I am your host, Jason Heath, coming to you from San Francisco, California, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.